Oh, in a bit.
Doing a live lesson.
Yes, in a moment. I can already hear you, I think.
Was that why they brought the kitten back?
Yeah, they want to see the kitten. They like the kitten better than not me.
Little Menace, you're going to be a TV star.
I don't actually know who's on at the moment. If you've joined it, can you just type something so I can see who's actually on it? I can't tell. I can only tell there's 3 people watching my face at the moment. Highlight of your day, yes, I'm sure. It's hard to tell sarcasm on text. Right. I'm just sending out an email to the different groups just to give them a link in case people can't get on it as well. Hello, hello, hello. So I sent to the other group as well. No, this isn't Fortnite, I guess. You know, Fortnite's far too up to date for me. If the game isn't 21 years old, it's not good. Hello. So we're up to 10. That's 2. We're up to 11. So if I now look on this, I can see people's names who have actually typed something. This is good. Right, I'll give it a few minutes for people to kind of log in, hopefully find it, and then we'll start going through people. For the moment, you can just watch my face. Back in a minute. Are they here again to look at it? I'm just driven past. I don't know if they're actually
Yeah,
doing
they are.
doing it.
He's going and knocking on the drop.
So I need to window touch quickly. Oh yes,
The roadwork guy's just pulled up there.
so we've obviously decided that there's someone on there and need to do something. So I got a water leak outside the house. There's several. He obviously come and checked on it earlier to decide what equipment he wanted.
Yeah. Oh, so we're going to go out anyway now.
Yes.
No.
Right, I'm going to start at a firm time of 10 to get the cat back. The cat is a law unto itself. If the cat doesn't want to be here, the cat will go away unless I forcibly restrain it. There you go. There's the cat back. I don't know where the other one is. The other one's outside killing things, I think. It's up to 19. Hoping for 20. If we get 20, that'll be a good showing for her. Yeah, the black cat likes to go out and kill mice and rats and bring them back into the house. That one's called 11. I don't know Stranger Things. I didn't name the cat. It's called 11. That's it. Yeah, sorry. It's not my choice. That's not me being hip and cool and down with the kids, unfortunately. Sorry. Disappointing, I know. Right, 1 minute and then we're starting, people. And hopefully you'll still be able to take some notes and write some things down as we go through. And I'll kind of set out what the plan is, people. San Miguel. Oh, don't drink stuff like that, Angus. Love Island. Okay, you're gonna have to listen to me while I kind of set up. Make me want to play. Let me make you. What's a PFP? Right, you lot are better at this than me. Okay, so we're looking at the kind of 2 questions I sent out yesterday. Oh right, profile picture. Got you. Okay. So the 2 questions, and these 2 questions can essentially work into all 3 of your different kind of questions. So if you think about the first of the 2 questions, you've got whether there is a kind of repressed lesbianism to Spark's figure of Sandy. And if there is, then you can deal with that in kind of multiple different ways. A, it obviously fits in with the gender and sexuality question, how that's kind of depicted. B, if you're looking at the kind of the abuse question or the dangers of education question, you can look at how the repression that Sandy faces is arguably a kind of result of this. What music? I think you're winding me up on that one. Unless it puts on something automatically, which I'm not aware of, you're hearing nothing apart from my voice. So it could be a result of kind of that repression that comes into it. Now, the other question around Brodie, again, it focuses around sexuality, maybe on the surface level with her repressed sexuality, but again, it leads into those other two questions, because as a result of her kind of repressed sexuality, it essentially leads into potential abuses of the children. Because of her position in education, she has access to the children, and she can use them as a kind of means of expression of that repression. Okay. No, my housemate isn't in the room at the moment. And he doesn't play Fortnite either, sorry. Okay. So the first question I kind of posed to you, as you were looking at this stuff overall, and I kind of posed to you the question, can we make a case for a kind of repressed lesbianism in the character of Sandy? Just by yes or no, type it in, people. Do you think that there is a case for this? Can you see evidence for this? Or do you think this is just over-exaggerated English teacher madness? Go on, give me more response than just Rofi. Yes, no? Yes, yes, yes. Anyone in disagreement so far? Is Sandy Butters? I don't think she's quite like Butters. Yes, yes. Don't know yet. Well, hopefully by the end of this we'll be able to make a case for it either way. Okay, so we're kind of coming to a consensus, and I mean, it is a debatable point. She does have kind of heterosexual relationships as well, but even in those kind of heterosexual relationships, we can kind of link back into the homosexual desires that she's got as well. So I've got kind of a series of questions that I'll kind of pose to you, and hopefully what you'll be able to do is answer me a little bit more. Just be willing to type stuff in, people, and kind of give me bits of evidence that kind of goes into this as well. Okay. So, okay, you're looking at kind of the first kind of side of the sheet that I gave you as part of this. You can go further into it than this as well, but I think there's bits on the kind of first side to it as well. Discord e-girls, right? Okay. Sexist. You're discriminating against an entire group there, Rofi. Where can you simply see evidence, and I'm looking for kind of direct quotations here, that Spark wants us to see a kind of overall sexual aversion from Sandy? What kind of bits of evidence can you see that shows that she's not really interested in sex beyond in a kind of functional way? What kind of bits of evidence would you kind of pull out from that? Go on, go on, go on. Yeah. So one of the things there pointed out, the scientific bit, she talks about it was rude in this scientific context. And think about the way she talks about kind of it in the second one. To have sexual intercourse, it's the terminology and the phrasing that Spark gives her suggests something kind of purely scientific in terms of the interest here. Yeah, I mean, you can apply as a modern audience as well potential discussions around even more fluid ideas of gender, whilst Muriel Spark is kind of writing in a very polarized period around gender. You guys can retroactively kind of apply different ideas. So you could, if you were doing the gender and sexuality question, you could talk about kind of asexuality. It doesn't even have to be linked into this kind of idea of lesbianism. That's potentially even cutting it down a bit from what it could be. Can anybody see other evidence that would suggest that she's kind of got an overall aversion? She's not really interested in it at all in a kind of physical sense beyond the theoretical. We've had the scientific context, we've had the sexual intercourse bit. Yeah, so if you look further down and you look at the kind of the discourse where they're imagining Brodie and Mr. Lloyd, is it at this point, or is it no, Mr. Lowther? Then she doesn't actually kind of allow the discussion to go onwards. Yeah, she moves that conversation. So where Jenny kind of sexualizes it, Mr. Lowther's legs are shorter than Miss Brodie's, so I suppose she whines, and you get the interruption. Where does Mr. Lowther live, do you think? She takes it back to something far more practical. Yes. And when she does enter into this affair later on, you have this reference, as kind of Rofi points out. It's not necessarily that she's interested in Teddy Lloyd as an individual, and she's not presented as necessarily interested in him as, you know, as a fully sexualized object. She doesn't desire him. She desires to understand his mind as part of it. Wait, what? What are we waiting for? Well, there's semi-naked girls at various points kind of depicted through it. I don't think you ever get a kind of completely yes. I think you lot are possibly over exaggerating the trauma slightly. Yeah. So where she talks around this kind of sexual image of who is it? Rose, isn't it? In the image, you get the kind of warping as well. You get the kind of idea of her as a mutation of flesh. I don't know which one you're saying isn't Christian. I am, I think. And you've been adopted by Rofi. Okay, so we see kind of her viewing sex in a kind of scientific sense. We've said that. We're saying we've got a kind of different view of sex. Where can we see? So again, you're looking across the sandy bits here, and I want you to start giving me evidence again, people. The narrative voice. Now, the narrative voice is going to be important. You're going to want to discuss the narrative voice in these kind of pieces of coursework. Muriel Spark is using an omniscient narrative voice, and it's able to enter into the characters' minds. And one of the characters it focuses on more than others is Sandy. So it enters into her mind more than it does any of the other characters that are in the narrative. Now, because it can enter into her mind, it can kind of hint at her inner thoughts and her inner feelings. Sandy never says overtly to anyone, I think I might be a lesbian. Yes, good. So she's kind of, I'll come to your point in a second, Anne. Let me just finish kind of setting up so that other people can get it, but that would be a good bit of evidence with that. So where does the narrative voice getting inside Sandy's mind hint at this kind of lesbianism, hint at this kind of homosexuality that maybe underlies the surface level? Have a think about it for a second. Then I'll go to Em's bit. I just want to see what other people are putting in. Okay. I'm going to start talking, people, but keep putting me evidence in. There's other bits that we could pick out from this that kind of go with it. No, not coffee, black coffee. You can't really see it from that angle. Anyway, so yeah, you get this kind of anecdote of them going out into the slums and them hearing about or hearing this conversation. And from Sandy's perspective, she hears this woman say, "I'll be your man," rather than "I'll be your woman," and it's never explained to her. No, I'm not washing the cup now. It's flavour. It's never explained to her. It references here, but it does give this a kind of homoerotic element to it. She's heard this as a kind of man kind of interaction. Yes, we've also got the bit where she's kind of we've had it in the first chapter, so I didn't kind of put it into this one too much. But yeah, she's looking at kind of Brodie's chest as well. There's a kind of sexualization of Brodie. Yes. So when you're talking about the kind of the context here, in this time period, she'd have to lead essentially a double life because it's still illegal to be homosexual at this point. The implications is that in Sandy's mind, and it's the omniscient narrator kind of going into Sandy's mind, that she in her own mind hears it as "I'll be your man." It's left ambiguous as to whether this woman ever actually says it, and the implication is that she probably doesn't, but that's what Sandy hears. So it's another one of kind of Muriel Sparks' hints at the potential kind of lesbianism that underlies the implication. Yeah, big shout out to the Stoke Vikings, the Dragons. Right. Where though we mentioned a double life, you'd have to lead a double life. Where does it talk about this leading a double life? I want some evidence for that. Show me evidence where it suggests she's got to lead a double life. In schools, yes, it would be absolutely unacceptable at this point in time to talk about anything to do with kind of homosexuality. So she's kind of forced into this. Yes. So it talks, doesn't it? And I find it on my page as well. It's like further down. Okay, so where you're kind of talking about the different contextual features here, the act that comes in later on, just remember that this is published a long way before the History Boys. So at the point of publication of the Prime Miscune Brodie, homosexuality hasn't been decriminalised, so it's still a kind of criminal activity, whereas it's been decriminalised at the point of the History Boys, but it's still kind of frowned upon, hence why Thatcher decided she needed Section 28. Okay. And then, sorry, going back up. So we talked about the double life bit. She's got this bit. Sandy waved from the window and wondered if Jenny too had the feeling of leading a double life fraught with problems even a millionaire did. So it's ambiguous here. What does this double life mean for Sandy? Is it about her sexuality? Well, arguably, the implication is yes, it's about her sexuality. Alongside that, so on another piece of evidence here, you're looking at the bit here, people, with the double life. where is there some kind of phallic symbolism that goes with this that potentially leads us to believe that this double life is in some way linked to sexuality? Yes. So alongside the leading of the double life, you've got this weird image of the evening paper rattlesnaked its way through the letterbox, and there was suddenly a 6 o'clock feeling in the house. And yeah, there's something kind of euphemistic about it. There's arguably a kind of phallic symbolism that goes with this, and it kind of marks a seeming change in a way. Suddenly, there's a 6 o'clock feeling in the house. So we can argue here that Spark is associating this kind of problems and the kind of the double life element with that kind of contemplation of sexuality through that kind of phallic symbolism that comes into this as well. Good. So we kind of go back to a point that I mentioned earlier then. Everyone's Tarduck. You guys quack me up. Right. Okay. So she does have a kind of an affair with Teddy Lloyd. Okay. Now, I want you to just think about this affair with Teddy Lloyd, and we've already pointed out some kind of elements of this affair with Teddy Lloyd. Where do we get other bits of evidence that suggest that she's not interested in Teddy Lloyd as a male lover, but what she's actually interested in Teddy Lloyd is potentially getting to Brodie, who she desires more, or simply kind of understanding his mind? What other bits of evidence would you build in there, people? So again, have a look at it quickly, quote me, type out some bits other than just ha ha, same, and yeah. Find me some other bits from the text, people. Right. Okay. Let me kind of reiterate, people. What I want you to just find me bits that suggest that it's not. I've always assumed that Boxy was Luke, to be honest. Well, I've missed out a bit that I'll have to go back to as well. Never mind. Yeah, Teddy Lloyd linked to a desire not for Teddy Lloyd as a person. Come on, find me stuff, people. Find me stuff. What we having? Yeah, so when Brodie kind of considers the two men initially, she sees them as kind of supporters. So there's not initially a kind of sexualized element to that bit there. I'm thinking more about Sandy though at the moment. So we can definitely mention that in relation to the kind of sexuality element for Brodie. Where have we got it for Lloyd, though, and Sandy? Come on, people, I want evidence. We're not going to be able to do it like this again if you're not engaging with it directly. Find me some interesting things. Key with the, so when you say you can only find relating to Brodie, maybe something around kind of Sandy kind of experiencing being Brodie through the relationship or something like that. Yeah, so art becomes really essential as a kind of symbol of this obsession from both sides. It becomes a medium through which people can express their kind of repressed elements. Yes. So the more she kind of realizes that she can't break him from his obsession with Brodie, the more she's kind of interested in him. The more she discovered him still to be in love with Jean Brodie, the more she was curious about the mind that loved the woman. So he's kind of drawn more and more and more to her by she's not 10 at this point, she's 10 at the start of the novel, she's 18 at the point she's having the love affair with him. So we span a kind of time period of about 8 years across it. Yes. So she, as sort of, I don't know who Lego Yoda is, but there we go. She keeps kind of focusing in on the fact that through each of these kind of canvases, it's Brodie that's essentially being drawn. And this is the thing that she's kind of interested in, as she uses to provoke him, is the implication as well. So you get dun dun dun. I've lost the bit I want. I've lost the bit I want, but never mind. It's essentially that kind of what provokes her into kind of, or provokes him into the relationship with her as well. I think it's because I've got it further down on the other side. Once this is done, for anybody who's kind of struggling to make notes on it, by the way, once I end the stream, the video of the stream will go up as well. So you'll be able to play back through certain bits and kind of make a note around it. So don't worry too much about having to get the notes down at this particular point in time, okay? So which other bits have we got? Yeah, that's another good point, Chantal. So you could look at the kind of attraction of Mrs. Lockhart, and she's another figure that, yeah, so sorry, I keep cutting in as I respond to various different comments. The comments will still be there as well. I think as you play it back, you basically get all of this, but you can kind of pause it, basically. So yeah, you could talk about Mrs. Lockhart in relation to this repressed sexuality as well, in that they actively or deliberately get ink onto their kind of clothing in order to be kind of held by Mrs. Lockhart, essentially. So there's a kind of potential desire that goes into that as well. I'm just going to point out another couple of features because there's another couple of bits I want to make sure you get from this bit. Then we need to, I'm looking at the time, and we'll need to start talking about the Brodie element. So, yeah, sorry, this is the bit I wanted. One day when they were alone, Sandy told Teddy Lloyd that all his portraits, even of the littlest baby Lloyd, were now turning out to be the likeness of Miss Brodie, and she gave him her insolent, blackmailing stare. He kissed her as he had done years before when she was 15. So that's the bit that kind of links into the kind of idea of the catalyst here. Yes. So there is that kind of sense that she's almost trying to block Lloyd and Brodie to come between them as part of it. And yes, there is an element of kind of paedophilia that comes into this. The page references are on the sheet that I gave yesterday. So anything I'm mentioning here beyond what people are putting into the chat box will be on the pages from yesterday. Yes. So she's almost kind of shocked that Lloyd is still attracted to Brodie. He can't see the ridiculousness within her. So this is all around the kind of page 122, but I'll try and kind of bring in the page references as requested if I can. Essentially there's an attempt to break in between, to almost potentially the catalyst thing is, a catalyst is something that kind of tips something over into something else. It kind of acts as a turning point, essentially. So her kind of provoking Lloyd, overtly saying all your pictures look like Miss Brodie, it's kind of the catalyst into the relationship. Right, I'm going to go back slide because a couple of bits I want to kind of point out. So I'm going back to the first page of the sheet that I sent out yesterday. Tell me what you're confused about, Izzy. Go on. I'll try and summarize at the end again as well. I'll talk through this, but pop me up what you're confused about. So if I go back and I'm looking at the bit, the Lady of Shalott bit, which is on page 23. The Lady of Shalott placed a white hand on Sandy's shoulder and gazed at her for a space. That one so young and beautiful should be so ill-fated in love, she said in low, sad tones. I don't believe there's a spider at all. Okay. Anyway, with that, did anybody look up the Lady of Shalott? Did anybody look up the reference? Did anybody find anything about it? This is one of those kind of entrances into Sandy's mind by this omniscient narrator. And Sandy very often in her mind is depicted as kind of telling stories to herself. Yeah, it's an intertextual reference. It's to a poem. I don't know whether anyone looked it up. Did anybody look it up? It's a poem by Tennyson. Anybody know who the lady supposedly is? What she's kind of known for? It's a thing about this girl. That's kind of non-specific at the moment. Yeah. So the reference here, she is, yeah, good. She's a kind of an imprisoned female figure, and very often kind of it's viewed and it's been done from a kind of feminist perspective. It's kind of about kind of repressed female desires. And there have been various kind of interpretations that go with it. And here, just think about the idea of Muriel Spark putting this into the novel as this kind of intertextual reference. The Lady of Shalott, who is kind of a repressed female figure herself, depicted as in a state of kind of sympathy and pity with Sandy, and that kind of implication that, like her, there's something repressed within this as well. No, she never explicitly says this, and she wouldn't, because you're dealing with a novel that at this point in time, when it's being written, homosexuality is still illegal. So she's doing this as a kind of maybe more subtle comparison, suggesting that both of them have this kind of hidden sexuality that goes with it. So you get this kind of story she's telling herself around the Lady of Shalott. You also get, so we've kind of touched on that bit. Yeah, the narrative voice is really important in showing this. And remember, you're going to be comparing this to the History Boys. So one of the things you can use to help you compare it and to talk about differences is the narrative voice. Yes, exactly. So one of the things that we still need to get to around Sandy is that she's depicted, and we get, and I've kind of mentioned this at various other points, it's what we refer to as kind of prolepsis, or a proleptic leap forward, where it looks into the future, and we see Sandy as a nun, and it's arguably a kind of idea of her being sexually repressed. Essentially, it's a way in which she can hide her sexuality, that she can kind of repress it. Yes, so as we get this kind of idea, Sandy going outside, unable to kind of fully explore that sexuality, just think, so I know I'm skipping backwards and forwards here slightly, but as the nun bit's been brought up, yeah, Sandy's like Posner. Is Sandy happy being a nun? So is there evidence that suggests here that Sandy is unhappy being a nun? The nun bit is on the third page of the sheet, and I think it's the third page anyway. No, perhaps not. Hang on. It's right at the end of the novel. There's a few references before, but there's reference on page 127 to 128. Where do we get a kind of hint that she's not happy in the kind of positioning as a nun? What suggests to us maybe that she's entrapped by this? Somebody give me something that suggests an entrapment. It keeps going up. 1920. Never mind. Yes. So as Josh points out here, is she just leaning against the bars? What's the verb choice here? She's doing what to the bars? You talk about the adverb with this as well. Yes. She clutched the bars, and she clutches them more desperately than ever. So within this, yeah, good. at the end point here, so for those of you confused, I'll go back to the start of the point. She's taken on the kind of position of a nun. Arguably, it's to kind of hide her sexuality or to legitimize that repression of her sexuality. But there's a sense of her being confined. When we see her as a nun, Spark often depicts her as talking to people through the kind of the bars. It's almost like a prison setting where the nuns are on one side, the person they're talking to the other. And here she's described as clutching them more desperately than ever. And there's a sense here of her kind of desperately seeking to break out, but being unable to. Okay, the other bit that we just need to talk about. Yeah, you won't need to go into Calvinism in masses of detail. There are different kind of religious strands, essentially. All of them that are kind of talked about in this are related into different strands of Christianity specifically. And Calvin is a kind of religious thinker and writer. It's the different forms of Christianity in this are often seen as one of the reasons for the repressed sexuality, though a lot of Christianity has got kind of quite closed-minded attitudes towards it. So she's kind of repressed in kind of many ways. I don't know what an IG Live is. I can't remember the ins and outs in terms of Calvinism and how it fits with Catholicism directly at the moment. But you can look into it. I wouldn't say you need massive detail around the kind of differences with it. The last bit to mention about Sandy is the police officer. As part of it, just the police officer quickly. So this is a bit that we've kind of skipped back, and on the sheet I sent out yesterday, it's on the second page of the sheet I sent out yesterday, and it's page 67 and page 69, the bits I've kind of picked out here as part of it. Now, the police officer is kind of an interesting bit because you can kind of talk about it in two different ways. That she's attracted to this kind of idea of the police officer and this kind of masculinized female, but there's also the link into the kind of denial of sex as well. Okay, so. Right. Okay. You've kind of questioned, does she dislike sex or does she dislike the idea of sex? And the evidence we kind of go here. Sandy was Anne Gray's right-hand woman in the force. And they were dedicated to eliminate sex from the Edinburgh and environments. Yeah, there's a sense that she sees almost all sex as something criminal. Yes, alongside that kind of idea of the criminalization of homosexuality. So she's kind of seeing all sex through the light of this kind of criminal aspect. What other bits of evidence could we pick out from those two police officer bits that would suggest that she's either attracted to the police officer bit or that she's kind of trying to deny sex entirely? Yes. So the fact that the police officer is female kind of masculinizes the police officer, and it kind of places her outside of typical gender boundaries. In relation to Zara's question, if you think about some of the bits that we pointed out from the first chapter of the novel, they as kind of figures sort of see sex within marriage as kind of different to sex outside of marriage. And she says, Miss Brodie has, no, our parents don't have primes. They have sexual intercourse. So it becomes two different things towards it. Yeah, so the idea of a female police officer associates with something kind of progressive as part of it. Yes, and you get those references in to the whole idea of, so she's got a very idealized image of the police woman, and certain bits of the police woman's kind of idiolect, their kind of accent she doesn't like. She wants to preserve the idealized nature of her. Yes, and certain bits of the language surrounding this kind of relationship between the two, they make it seem kind of romantic. So they pressed hands in gratitude. They looked into each other's eyes. So to kind of summarize and to kind of cut back the confusion slightly, these are all different kind of images she has of herself at different points in time. Remember, the events of this novel span essentially around about a period of 8 or 9 years. In fact, no, a bit longer than that, if we're looking at Sandy as a nun as well. And you get this kind of conflicted view within her. She both desires the police officer, but she also kind of links in ideas of sex with criminality. It shows a really confused Spark trying to create the image of a very confused individual. And the same when she's become a nun, she's essentially trying to repress her sexuality whilst at the same time hurting herself through this repression. Bother Sandy, great deal that she. Yes, so she's having to invent this new image of the policewoman. She's having to invent something that fits with her kind of ideal, because she's got this kind of desperate idea that she wants to see her in a certain way. Okay. At this point, I'm just going to sum up quickly, and then we'll talk a bit around the Brodie stuff as well. Okay. Yeah. So the implication here, and what, and just kind of build on that point, the implication here is that because she's been taught that this whole idea is kind of disgusting and that it's taboo, she's essentially repressing it, because to speak it aloud would probably lead to rejection, to disgust. It's not going to be an empowering experience for her to kind of present this overtly. As I say, yes, she's ashamed because she's been taught to be ashamed of this. The whole of her life and her upbringing is repressed, and it's kind of going to make her ashamed. So just to point out, just to summarize, remember, you can go back over this. If people want to ask me follow-up questions, you can do. Ask me, that's fine. I'm just experimenting with this form, and I know it kind of maybe feels a bit quick at the moment. There's a sense with Sandy that she's got this kind of hidden aspect to her sexuality that's presented to us. That a lot of the repression potentially comes from the religious aspect, that there's a sense of desire within Sandy that's kind of hinted at for Brodie, that even in her relationship for Lloyd, she desires Brodie through this. And there's a lot of kind of references that suggest that she's kind of suffering a great deal because of this confusion. I'm going to move the discussion on, people, and for this next bit, we're focusing on the second question that I gave you, okay? And for the second question I gave you, it's to what extent are the adult characters in the primary Stu and Brodie presented as sexually repressed rather than empowered, okay? Hang on, I've missed a few as we go up as well. Is there anything I've missed that's sort of... Yes, and a lot of this can be kind of taken back to Brodie, and Brodie is kind of... Brodie doesn't touch the students in the same way, but Brodie arguably uses the students in the same way. And you can create parallels between Brodie and between Brodie and Hector. Yeah, Chloe's point there is an interesting one. Remember, Brodie is masculinized through a lot of it as well, and arguably this is an aspect of why there's an attraction to. We can't do Zoom, people. There are various kind of college reasons in terms of kind of security and things like that with Zoom, unfortunately. Also, if you try to do a Zoom thing with lots and lots of people, it's just horrible, horrible noise rather than anything else, unfortunately. It's not the most productive thing in the world. So let's have a look at the Brodie ones. Now, I'm going to pose this to you to start with, because we're kind of saying, is she a kind of an empowered sexual figure, or is she repressed? Do you think... you can see me but not hear me? I think that's freezing up in your end. Everything looks fine in my end. I think your mum's doing Skype classes, but that she's working at university, Zara. So I think that there's kind of different rules at different age groups with it, and sort of the logistics of setting it up as well. Anyway, so with Brodie, do you think that she kind of gave herself up to Hugh? Do you think that hers and this lover, this kind of army lover, do you think that that was a sexual relationship or not? I will try and do this bit slightly more quickly. Hopefully, just a quick kind of 20-minute discussion around the Brodie bits for people who are wondering. Yeah, the sheet from yesterday is the one I'm kind of working around. You think once upon a time she was a hoe? Is Zara gone or is Zara still here? Right, other than Dagan, who thinks that Brodie was a bit of a hoe, or do we think that she remained pure? Yeah, the 5 pages. Come on, behave, people. I want sensible answers to this, or it has to go back to just videos. Okay. So we're starting to get some answers kind of coming through. Yeah. So if we think about kind of Brodie and you look at these early bits, and I'm going to kind of point out some bits here, I think, just to make it go a bit quicker, because it's going on. We're over an hour that we've gone live now. Yeah, they clung to each other with passionate abandon. There's something kind of euphemistic to this. It's presented in a kind of euphemistic way, but it does have a kind of sexual element that goes with it. Yeah, and there's a sense that in certain ways she tries to kind of preserve a purity or claim a purity and a kind of moral high ground that she essentially doesn't really have a right to claim. So on that first sheet, on the page 19 to 20 bit, you've got their love was above all that. So this seeming claim of a kind of idealized love. And then on the other side of it, you've simply got the kind of the passionate abandon. But Brodie herself is repressed through kind of religious elements as well. So you've got kind of she was not allowed to do cartwheels on Sundays, for in many ways Miss Jean Brodie was an Edinburgh spinster of the deepest dye, and she's kind of essentially restricted through certain moral aspects but not through others. So which other bits of evidence we got coming up here? Yes. I decided to enter into a love affair as the only cure. So on one side, she's kind of sexually empowered. She's, I don't know what pied means. Sexually empowered through that. But on the other hand, it's because she's repressed in another aspect. Yeah, there's this aim to be pure, but in fact, she actually ends up becoming more corrupt than anything else. I'm trying not to ignore anyone. It all comes through a bit quick for my mind to take in. In fact, no, that's yeah. And with her relationship with Lowther, she looked at him in this kind of severely and possessive way. It's not that she's, and there is a sexual element to it, but it's because she wants kind of power and control, and she's been repressed elsewhere, is the kind of implication. I'm gonna have to work out how to put the slow mode on this, I think. I don't think that's a direct quote, Luke, from the text. Right. Okay. I'm going to move it on slightly. I'm going to point out some other bits directly. Okay. So we've kind of already touched on. Oh, here we are. The fact she's described as the only sex bestowed object in their daily environment. So, for all that Brodie is maybe sexually repressed, could we agree that she is presented as more sexually empowered than other figures in the narrative? What do we think to that one, people? Is she, if you're looking at this on a spectrum, and you're thinking about this in the 1930s, where there's no real kind of idea of sexual empowerment as in the same way as now, is she more sexually empowered than other characters? I think yes. So those of you kind of saying yes to an extent, if you've not read the whole book, get through it now quickly. Make sure you get through it before we start writing about it. Yes, more sexually empowered than Sandy would be an interesting point. Both of them are repressed characters, but she at least does have an outlet. Yes, she acts in a less kind of constricted way. Yes, overpowered like Thanos. Let's just talk around some of the other bits here as well. No, Friday's lesson will probably be another video one. Next week I might try and do another live one. I'll see what the kind of overall consensus and feedback is from this one, after you've had a chance to kind of wind down from it as well. Okay, so art. Okay, art is something, if you're talking about kind of sexuality within the narrative, you want to talk about the art. So what does Mr. Lloyd do when he first introduces the kind of girls to the art? What's he kind of doing with these artistic pictures that suggest that Teddy Lloyd is also a kind of repressed sexual figure? Give me some direct quotations, people. Where do we see Teddy Lloyd as also being a repressed sexual figure? Right, and a slight misquoting there. Yes, so Josh is making a sensible point, people, more like Josh's. You get the kind of the moving over the kind of eroticized areas within these pictures. It suggests that what Muriel Spark is suggesting here in the novel is that his pictures serve as a kind of a way of expressing this kind of sexuality. Yeah. Yeah, so this reference to him kind of shouting in a hoarse voice that's got those kind of underlying associations that go with it. What else? We've already mentioned this. Every time that Teddy Lloyd draws a painting or paints a painting, what ends up happening in the painting that suggests that he himself is a kind of repressed sexual figure? Go on, I want an answer, people. Good. Ollie's giving me a sensible answer. Yeah. So we've got these. He paints someone. What does it turn into? Which person does it turn into? Okay. So yeah, it's essentially each time he paints a picture, it turns into Brodie. Okay. I think it's just because the stream's been going on for a bit longer, it starts to kind of lag slightly. I'm just going to point out one kind of last bit that kind of breaks into this. Okay. So the bit that I want to pay attention to kind of close it down, and then I'll kind of summarize quickly. Look at the bit, it's on page 5 of the sheet that I gave you yesterday. Let me just double check that, or is it page 6? No, sorry, it's on the 6th page of the sheet that I gave you yesterday. And in the novel, it's on page 100 to page 101, okay? And it's that description of the picture of Rose that he's kind of created. And think about the symbolism that Muriel Spark creates. There's on 3 pages, WDYM. This image that Spark has created, because he's missing one arm. He hasn't got 2 arms. Right. So the swathing of crimson velvet was so arranged that it did 2 things at once. It made Rose look one-armed like the artist himself. So within the painting, Rose is the artist. She becomes Teddy Lloyd. There's a symbolism to this. And at the same time, she also becomes Miss Brodie. So I think if you want to look at the art here as a kind of consummation of this kind of repressed sexuality, it's probably one of the best images to look at, in that it kind of captures the way in which in the art it brings in both of the individuals. It's both himself and it's Brodie. Yes. Or Hector uses kind of the poetry. He uses he talks about teaching itself as having a kind of an eroticism that goes with it. So it's both education. Yeah. Education in itself is a kind of an erotic act, he sort of says. This is linking to Brodie and Lloyd, Teddy Lloyd here, Rofi. They're all very much kind of repressed. This is kind of Lloyd using the artwork to bring himself and Miss Brodie together, or Spark doing it in a sense to kind of draw them together. Is there anything else I kind of desperately want to draw out of this? I think what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm going to do a kind of summary point, people, just because I don't know quite how much of attention I'm getting at this stage. Yes, she just wants Lowther for sex because she can't be with Lloyd. She wants Lloyd and can't be with him. So in relation to Brodie and Teddy Lloyd, you can talk about them to kind of alongside each other. Muriel Spark here, so keep linking back to the author. The cat's gone somewhere, I'm afraid. I don't know where. And essentially what she's doing in this kind of linking between the two, she's suggesting that kind of they're both suffering from a kind of repressed sexuality, arguably linked to the kind of religious background, and they essentially live it out then, this repressed sexuality, through various kind of hidden means, through the artwork, and then essentially through the students at the end. Okay. And because they're living through the students, it can be argued even that it turns into a kind of an abuse, that there's been this kind of grooming element that's been happening the whole way through, with this as the kind of ultimate end to it here. Yeah, you can link into kind of Sappho, although Sappho apparently was kind of, if you look at her poetry, there's less the repression that goes with it. Yes, you can link this into Spark's own kind of repressed sexuality potentially as part of it as well. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to leave it here for this one at this point, people. As I say, I'm trying to experiment with this. Yeah, Sappho, if you look at Sappho's poetry, it's not directly referenced within the text as part of it. You can link it to all three different questions, Rofi. Both of them you could talk about for the dangers of sexuality because it shows that kind of repressed sexuality for different reasons. You can link to abuse because arguably both Teddy Lloyd and Miss Brodie abuse their positions in order to kind of gain sexual gratification, to live out what they're repressed through. And you can also link it to the dangers of education question, in that this repressed sexuality in Sandy is caused by a failure to address this through the education system, and Miss Brodie and Teddy Lloyd are depicted as abusing their positions of trust, which they're provided through the education system in order to kind of satisfy their own desires. Any other questions, people? Give me other questions before I kind of cut the stream. Hang on a second. Okay. There you go. So he kisses her once when she's 15, and it's not until 18 when they kind of enter into a kind of sexual relationship. Yeah, I went to go and get the cat for you, but it's sodded off again. You coming back up? No, it's not. Thank you. Yes. There you go. Any other questions, people? Right, in which case, people, yes, safe. I'll have a think about it. I might try and I don't know, consider kind of ordering some questions potentially with it. I won't do a live stream on Friday for the lesson, but I'll consider potentially doing another one next Tuesday to kind of experiment around with it, people. Okay. That's me gone for the moment, though. Toodaloo.